Prof Paul, can I just get you to just go straight into it?
Sure.
Can I just get you to do a quick introduction? Okay. How do you introduce yourself?
Okay. Yeah. Hi. My name is Dr. Paul Tambyah. I'm an infectious disease doctor. I work at one of the local hospitals, teaching hospitals. I'm also at the university, and I'm also chairman of the Singapore Democratic Party. I've been involved in opposition politics formally for the last 7 years, and I've really enjoyed my time there.
Formally for the last 7 years, but yes. You joined in 2011.
I didn't actually join as a member. I was a volunteer because I was actually a founding member of MARUA. MARUA is the Singapore Human Rights Group. And under the ROS, you cannot be a member of a political party. So I actually joined as a member of the SDP a few days before the general election in 2015 because I enjoyed my time in MARUA and I didn't want to quit until I really had to. So I quit just before GE 2015.
So do you shop around for a party to join, or why SDP?
Well, I did. I visited different parties. When the Reform Party was started by JBJ, a lot of people were very interested in it. I attended many of the Workers' Party functions. But ultimately, the SDP's philosophy was closest to my own. They're pretty much left of center, believe in basic human rights, a right to education, a right to housing, a right to healthcare. And these are rights, not entitlements.
So what's the difference between, in your perspective, what's the difference between a right and entitlement for Singaporeans?
Well, I mean, again, there's a relatively fine line, but I think if something is a right, and here we're talking about basic, that it's the state's obligation to provide it. We pay taxes, we are citizens, and what do you get in exchange for your taxes? You get security. Singapore's got pretty good security. But I think in addition to that, you need to at least have a roof over your head that you can afford, that's not going to eat into your retirement savings. And at the same time, you need to have decent healthcare.
Do we not have all those of the above?
We do, but you have to pay for it.
Okay.
And that's the difference. You see, if it's a right, then it's provided for you. You see, like, for example, I did my postgraduate training in the US, and there was one of my colleagues who was from Colombia. And he said security is not a right in Colombia. The rich hire bodyguards, otherwise they get kidnapped. That's the kind of situation. Whereas in Singapore, security is a right. Every single one of us has the right to security, and we trust in the SAF, we trust in the SPF to protect us, keep us safe. See, none of us, except for maybe the few very wealthy ones, needs to hire a bodyguard. And I think most of those are just for show.
So for things like housing and healthcare, like you mentioned,
right,
do you think that they should be completely free?
No. So again, this is the idea, is that for housing and healthcare, they should not be profit centers. If you want to do cost recovery, you can do that. But that should be from those who can afford to pay. For those who cannot afford to pay, this is where the idea of we living together in a community, you help those who are less fortunate than yourself. So I think that's the principle that the SDP has, and it's in line with my kind of views.
And that's why you chose the SDP.
That's right.
Okay, coming to the SDP, right? I think maybe I just share with you some of my background in just kind of like local politics as well.
Sure.
So I was a PAP member for about 10 years.
Okay.
I just quit last year. I just quit earlier this year officially.
Right.
To just focus on this podcast. But not that anyone cared. I'm nobody in the PAP. But
not a CADA member.
Yeah, I'm not a CADA member.
Yeah.
I went for a CADA interview, but I failed because I was too young. The time they told me I was too young and all.
Yeah.
But it's okay. So I joined a PAP because I was in financial services for 10 years.
Right.
So in 2011, one of my clients became MP.
Okay.
Vikram Nair.
Right.
And I was young. I just came off NS. My dad had just passed away.
Right.
So I had nothing much to do. And when a client becomes an MP and so happens that he was with Minister Shanmugam at Chong Pang, and I jumped at the chance to to volunteer with him, and to me that was an opportunity for me to expand my network,
right,
and to just know more people.
Did you know his family?
I knew his family afterwards, but I didn't know
his mom is a psychologist.
Yeah,
and in fact she knows my aunt very well.
So
Singapore is a very small place.
It's very.
Yeah.
So one day Vikram called and he said that I'm going to a place called Admiralty.
Right.
And it's just nearby Yishun, Chong Pang. And if you want to, you can come with me. And I said, yeah, sure. And for 9 days during G11, right, I was there every day at the campaigning. Nobody knew who the hell I was. Everybody just knew me as, hey, that's the candidate's friend, that's a candidate's friend, you know.
Okay.
And everybody gave me like extra courtesy, you know, because I was brought in by Vikram himself. And because I was like, I knew Vikram, right? So of course I assisted him, and at the market, you know, I can speak okay fluent Hokkien and Mandarin. So I helped him with like translation and stuff. Then at the last day, towards the end of the campaign, the CCC chairman came to me and he said that, hey, young man, I think I think you're suitable to volunteer in the grassroots. Why not you join us in the grassroots?
Okay.
I had no idea what the grassroots was. And so that was how I was with the PP and for about 10 years. And in between, I joined a few different constituencies and I was involved with a few constituencies. I was LA to one of the MPs as well.
Which MP was that?
Cheng Li Hui.
Okay.
I was LA to Li Hui.
Right.
So I wanted to do this podcast, right? I told her that I think it's better for me. I think it's, I hope I can get a blessing, like, essentially. I hope that I can just quit the party, quit the grassroots, and I can be bipartisan and just do this. So that's my experience with politics.
Right.
And I have been involved with G11, 15, and 20 as well.
Right.
And for me and my friends, when we talk about the SDP always stands out in two aspects. One is in terms of policy work.
Right.
You guys are very, very clear and in terms of putting out an alternative policy framework. So recently PM was saying that the opposition has gone MIA, and I was just going through the SDP's website earlier, and the SDP has a page for all major a stand for all major
for housing,
policies.
For healthcare, even for immigration.
Exactly, even for town council as well.
That's correct.
For cost of living.
Yes.
So that's one. The second thing is we always recognize the very strong capabilities of the SDP in terms of new media work.
Right.
So you guys produce...
It's these people.
So these are the heroes behind the scenes. So you guys produce very good... and the production quality is, it's impressive.
Right.
For a political party.
It's so small.
Yeah. And also like Dr. Chee, what he has put out as well.
Sure.
Yeah. So these are the two things that are very strong that we see as the SDP has to offer.
Right.
What do you think are the advantages or the competitive advantages that you see the SDP has in today's scene?
Well, I mean, you're spot on about the policies. And I think this is one of the things that also attracted me to the SDP, because I got involved with the healthcare group, and in fact that's the whole reason why I got into politics in the first place, is because I realized that Singapore has some of the best doctors, nurses, we have the best infrastructure, but there's a disconnect in terms of the financing, and so I'm an infectious disease specialist, but I also do some general medicine. And it used to be really frustrating because I would see these people who had strokes, and then invariably they would say, oh yeah, 10 years ago I was diagnosed with high blood pressure, but I never took any medicine. I said, why? Oh, no time, or too expensive, or I saw a GP, he put me on this very expensive medication. After a while I couldn't afford to do it. Polyclinics only open from 8:30 to 5. I was working, see. So I felt that there's a disconnect here, see, that all the ingredients are there, but somehow the cake doesn't seem right, see. And when I delved deeper into it, I realized that a lot of it is in a way political and ideological. And it's not exclusively the PAP. This is essentially the neoliberal point of view, which came from Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher in the 1980s. And what they did was this belief that if you give people something for free, they're going to take advantage of that. See? And the so-called buffet syndrome. See? And frankly, to me, that doesn't make sense when it comes to healthcare. You're talking about chemotherapy. You're talking about children who have to go and get very toxic drugs and things like that. Nobody's going to do it just because it's free. It's kind of illogical. But that's the kind of argument that you get from American right-wing policymakers. And unfortunately, you see, I did my postgraduate in the US, and then I came back, and I couldn't stay in the US because the healthcare system in the US is just so extreme in that point of view. They have really, really good healthcare, but it's out of reach of there are 40 million people without insurance. And what kind of made it a bit upsetting was that in Singapore, we seem to be determined to repeat every mistake of US healthcare of the last 20 years. And so I felt that, if I was given the opportunity to do this, so there were two of my colleagues, actually two of my classmates, medical school classmates, so both GPs, and they met with Dr. Chee, and then, they said, let's come together and come up with an alternative policy. And so we launched it, I think it was in 2012, after the GE, and it was kind of it was very well thought out. We had a couple of specialists, but mainly GPs who were putting it together. And I think it made the PAP sit up a bit. And like, for example, MediShield Life, because the old MediShield, there was all kinds of restrictions. You couldn't use it for diabetes. You couldn't use it for all kinds of things. And the pre-existing condition thing, it's not entirely our doing. It was also Obamacare, which came in around the same time. And the biggest thing about Obamacare is that it took away the exclusion for pre-existing conditions. And also one of the Straits Times journalists, Chua Mui Hung, she wrote a series of pieces about how she herself was uninsurable because she had breast cancer a long time ago. She was cured, but no insurance company would touch her because it's considered a pre-existing condition. Yeah.
Okay, Prof, so I know what you're talking about is actually the SDP proposal to have a single payer system for healthcare. And what we are currently having for the longest time is the 3 M's.
Right.
The Medisave, MediShield Life, and Medifund. For audience who are not familiar with the single payer concept, can you just very briefly let us know what is it about?
So actually, to be completely accurate, the 3 M's only account for about 15% of healthcare in Singapore.
15%?
Well, 1.5. They have never accounted for more than that. In fact, the biggest contribution to healthcare is equally government subsidies, which accounts for about 35%. And then there's another 35 to 40%, which is from employer-funded healthcare. So in other words, your panel doctor, and that's how most working Singaporeans get their healthcare.
Which is from the insurance companies mostly.
Correct, which is mostly from insurance companies. So it's the trouble is that a lot of this insurance is primarily hospital-centric. And even the government subsidies, they do go to the polyclinics. And after, GE 2011, there was the Pioneer generation, which was hugely helpful to older people. And then subsequently the Merdeka generation. But before that, most of the subsidies were hospital-based. And most of the insurance is still hospital-based. And part of the reason why there's this huge jam in the hospitals is because a lot of the time you can't claim insurance for outpatient procedures.
Okay.
So your doctor tries to help you and he admits you. And then, you end up taking up a bed which you may not necessarily need. So the single payer system actually tries to break down the barrier between public and private. And what it is you have a single national health insurance scheme. And if you want to, you can buy something in addition to that. You can buy your own private insurance. But this health insurance scheme covers basic healthcare. We're going to do away with the A class, B class, C class in the public hospitals. And public hospitals will provide just a basic level of care. And if you want, like I said, the hotel services, you can buy your own private insurance and you can take care of that. And the thing is that, like right now, when you go into a hospital, the system is very efficient. You register with your IC. They know that you have Income Shield or you've got one of the Shield plans. They know how much is your Medisave. And then the Medisave has a daily limit. MediShield has a co-payment. You've got to pay a deductible. And so it's very, very complicated. And in fact, the administrative costs of having so many different schemes is quite significant. So the idea is if you have a single payer scheme, there's only one payer. It's not Medisave plus MediShield plus your Shield plan plus your whatever out of pocket. There's a co-payment. So we do have a co-payment as well. But the co-payment is capped and it's dependent on your income. If you have no income, then there's no co-payment. The government will fund the co-payment. And this is where we channel currently the 35% government subsidy. Instead of going to everybody, it goes to those who are most in need of it. So basically, and the other thing that's different about this in the current system is that it can be used either in the public or private sector. And so like for your GP visits, if it's Cough or cold, there's a co-payment, and then anything in addition to that is covered. If it's a chronic condition, then the bulk of it will be covered under the insurance plan, and you pay a small co-payment as well. So, like right now, the government has recognized the importance of primary care. So there's this healthier SG thing that's coming out. The downside is that from my GP friends, there's a lot of resistance. And part of the thing is because they haven't figured out the pricing mechanism. And they're trying to get the GPs to lower the cost of drugs. But for the GPs, the bulk of their income comes from sale of drugs.
Okay.
So that's a very hard sell to them. One solution would be actually to let the GPs buy the drugs at the GPO tender, which is the price the government pays for the drugs, and then publish that price so that people know. If I see GPA, I pay a markup of 2 times. I see GPB, I pay a markup of 3 times. But then GPB, I don't have to wait so long, so I don't mind going to GPB. In a way, this kind of transparent pricing. But I doubt that they'll be willing to do that.
Okay. So one of the reasons the government have come out to say that why there's a need to increase the GST coming 1st of Jan and in next year is because of the increase in healthcare expenditures and the need to take care of our aging population. So this proposal that the SDP has, right, will it significantly increase expenditure from the government's
Actually,
coffers?
It doesn't. And in fact, we think it's actually going to be cost neutral compared to the current expenditure. And actually, that was when the plan was, the last time we revised it was 2020. And when we did our sums, it actually worked out to equivalent to the 2020 expenditure, but in 2019 expenditure. But in the last couple of years, healthcare spending has ballooned. In fact, healthcare has overtaken defense as the number one government expense. But that is partly driven by the pandemic.
Partly, but yeah. Is it mostly the aging population?
I think part of it is it's very hard to say because we don't get very detailed breakdown of the figures. But a lot of it is also infrastructure costs. You see, for a long time, the government didn't build hospitals. KTPH was the first hospital that was built after a very long time, when Toa Payoh was shut down. Changi was built when Toa Payoh moved over there, and then there was silence for a long time. Then KTPH was built. Then Ng Teng Fong was built. And then now Woodlands is coming, Sengkang came up, and then Woodlands, and then now Bedok is going to be the next one. So there's and infrastructure costs in Singapore are very high. So a lot of the healthcare expenditure has gone to construction, staffing of these new hospitals. And in a way, I'm not so sure that that's the way to go. Because, in many countries, especially the high-income countries, where building costs are high and manpower costs are high, they're moving away from big hospitals. And what they're doing is they're empowering the GPs. So in a way, I'm really hoping the healthier SG will succeed. But, they need to break free from the old way of thinking, and they need to really trust the GPs in a way. Because frankly, I'll give you a perfect example. So I have a patient who I was on the ward service last week. And this lady needs eye drops every 3 hours. And so we tried to teach her how to do it, but she couldn't do it. She's like 75 or 80 years old. And her husband works as a bus driver. He starts work early in the morning. He comes back late at night. So he cannot do the eye drop. So we explored all kinds of ways. And then they said, you pay $100 a day, you can get one of those nurses to come and sit with her. I said, she doesn't need someone to sit with her. I said, why can't we just pay the GP, ask the GP downstairs to send his nurse upstairs? You pay $20 for every time she puts the eye drop. That's like $60 for 3 times a day. The GP keeps $10, the nurse keeps $10. But it just cannot be done, see, because the system is such that there's like a wall between the public and private sectors. So in the end, we ended up putting her in a community hospital.
Okay. Do we have not enough GPs in Singapore today? What's your views?
Actually, I think we have too many GPs.
Too many GPs. But the GPs are always so busy.
They are, but that's not all of them. In fact, if you go to any HDB car park where there are like 4 or 5 blocks around you, every block has a GP downstairs. There are 2 of the GPs which are people lining up outside. The other 3 GPs are sitting around doing nothing, playing computer games. And these are the ones who are doing Botox. That 50 to 60% of the GPs in Singapore are doing Botox.
Oh, really?
Yes, that's actually a MOH statistic. See?
Okay.
And the reason why they're doing that is because they don't have enough, or actually maybe they're making a bit more money from the Botox than from looking after old
So
people.
the way I look at GPs is that, there are the more traditional kinds, like like what Dr. Tan Ching Bok used to
correct.
be, right? You know, you're a GP and in fact you are like a neighborhood character.
Correct. Everybody knows you.
Everybody knows you, and you have seen patients for like 2-3 generations.
Correct.
You know, the grandmother goes to see you, the grandchildren goes to see
That's
you,
right.
and then there's now increasingly a lot of chain brands
Correct.
GPs who are out.
Yes.
And they have all these doctors who are salaried workers,
Correct.
I suppose.
In fact, a lot of them are even locums. They are part-time. Yeah.
So it feels a lot more transactional going to see them, and you might not always see that doctor the next time. So there's no continuity in that, and therefore the neighborhood GPs, those who have been in the neighborhood for a while, for many years, are always very crowded.
That's right.
I just saw my GP last week because my tonsils kept flaring up, you know, and getting married, so I went back to you know, she gave me my antibiotics and stuff, but I had to wait like. It was a 3 hours wait.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah, it was.
So
it was 3
must
hours
be
wait.
very good. I mean, most people wouldn't wait 3 hours to see a GP.
But the good thing about her is that I can call to get a number.
Right.
So the staff would tell me that you come out in 2 hours time.
Okay. So that's, yeah. And again, that's the natural advantage of the GP, because they're just downstairs from where you are. See? And again, I think that is actually the core of this whole universal healthcare idea, is that you disseminate care so that you don't concentrate it. It's also much cheaper and more efficient when it's done by somebody who's nearer to you.
So coming to Healthier SG, right? If you are the healthcare minister, you know, okay, let's not take Healthier SG aside, but how will you empower the GPs to do more to serve the community?
Yeah, I'll give you another example. Okay, so my mom is 85 years old. She had a filling which fell out. So I took her to a friend of mine who's a dentist, and he actually said he has 2 clinics. One in Orchard Road, he says not so accessible by wheelchair. Another one in HDB estate. He said you better bring her there. He said that's easier to get to. So I brought her there. He did the filling. And then he said, when was the last time she had a scaling and polishing? I said, oh, some time ago. Then he said, I can do that too. And he billed $135, but she only had to pay $28. And we had I said, I don't have a Pioneer Generation card. He said, it's all right, it's automatic. So I think it shows that the system can work. See?
So that's from the Medisave yearly.
It's actually from the Pioneer Generation.
Okay.
And this is a response to there was a period when you had to wait 6 months to see a dentist in the public sector. So what the government did was they realized for these elderly people, it makes sense to engage the GPs. The private dentists, and they did, and all of a sudden the queue for the elderly disappeared. But there are still young people waiting to see dentists in the public sector. So I think it can be done. Of course, there are a few bad apples. And there are some dentists who got in trouble because of trying to defraud Medisave.
Yep.
But the vast majority are doing the right thing. And this is a sense that, people get about the PAP. They say if there are 2 or 3 people who try and cheat the system, then they punish the 97 people who are not.
So it's too heavy-handed.
It's a bit too heavy-handed, and it assumes the worst of people. See?
Okay. The other thing I want to discuss about healthcare is about Medisave.
Right.
So one of the things that I read in SDP's healthcare policy is that my grandfather just passed away last year.
Right.
He was 87,
and
he was relatively healthy. He had a bypass 30 years ago. He has been on chronic heart medication.
Sure.
So he had a nomination done for his CPF monies, and it turns out that he had $30,000 in Medisave money.
Right.
That was paid out to the beneficiary, because he had a nomination. So it was very seamless.
Yes.
Nothing had to be done. In fact, just like a week after the wake,
it's automatically credited.
the check came out.
Yeah.
And but the thing is that he is a very responsible and frugal old man.
Right.
And he was always very concerned that he was outliving his resources.
Right.
And so, he would always be, but it's also his character and nature as well. But I was just thinking, if he was able to assess a bit of that 30,000, that would have given him
a better quality of life.
Exactly. And it would have given me a more peace of mind as well, dealing with I mean, the last thing, it's not like he has to go out to work or he has to go out to, you know.
Well, he's fortunate. There are quite a lot of old people who have to go out.
There are, exactly. Yes. And I always tell him that he's very fortunate as well.
Right.
And we are very fortunate because he is a responsible kind of person.
Yeah.
So he has managed his finances very well.
Right.
He retired at 55.
Oh, really? Okay.
And he never worked.
Right.
And just with, you know, some family contribution and he managed to, you know, to not have to work.
Sure.
But I also think about how the $30,000.
Right.
I mean, the beneficiaries, we don't need the money.
Correct.
Know? If there was a way for him to access the money, that would have been nice.
Yes.
So what is SDP's
well, the first thing we're going to do is actually to get rid of Medisave.
Okay.
You know, it's
because with the single payer.
Yes, with the single payer, you don't need Medisave. Because in a way, the government is insuring. And in fact, this is one of the things we actually suggest that they reinsure. So you insure yourself, but you also reinsure, so that you don't get hit by, you know, these kids who need the $2 million drug.
What do you mean by we reinsure? So that means the government will outsource out the
so they
buy insurance on the
it's like a shipping company. You know, a shipping company buys insurance, and then the insurance company will reinsure, will take. So it will distribute the risk to other companies, because otherwise, if the ship goes down, you know, that could be the end of the shipping company. So similarly, you know, we've argued that there should be the government should be the insurer, but at the same time, it should consider reinsurance on this. So one of the things about this whole Medisave idea is again, it's philosophical. See, the government in Singapore tends to be super kiasu. See, and they are planning for you know, everything bad to happen to you all at once. And it is true. There will be some people, you know, at the age of 55. I mean, we were just talking about someone who had cancer, and then after that, his daughter had a very rare infectious disease, and so they all came together at the same time. Yeah. And this kind of person can bust his Medisave very quickly. And there are quite a lot of people who exhaust their own Medisave.
My mum did.
Yeah,
my mum did. Yeah.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also recognize that because there is all these safeguards in terms of Medisave limits, right? So it does seem like the government is always planning, like what you said, the worst case scenario.
Exactly.
And also, we are being put behind by the weakest link.
Yeah, correct.
In the society, right?
Yeah.
So for people who, so take for example the minimum sum scheme that we have to put aside.
Yes.
Of course, there are always stories of, you know, previously when there was no minimum sum scheme, there were stories of uncles going to Batam, right?
Yeah,
with, you know, with their savings and all.
Yeah, but frankly, you know, I think those are really apocryphal, and it's a bit like Ronald Reagan used to tell this story about a welfare queen who was driving a Cadillac. It turned out it was completely made up. You see. So it's just these stories get passed around, and after a while they get a veneer of truth, when in reality they're extremely rare. I can tell you frankly, most of the uncles who go Batam, they have no CPF to begin with. See, they were off-job workers, or they were, you know, engaged in sort of their own activities, and they didn't really have very much CPF to start with.
The uncle who goes to Batam,
right,
who is an off-job, let's say in this case, an off-job worker, how well do you think you can relate to him?
Yeah, I mean,
when he's a voter, you know, this character. You know?
And this is where, again, I have the privilege of working in a public hospital for 30 years. And I can tell you, I do infectious disease. And the core infectious disease, or the world's most well-known infectious disease, is HIV. So quite a number of my patients are these uncles who go to Batam. And they all have, you know, different kinds of stories. And it's quite interesting to hear what they have to say. What is really sad, though, and again, this is the thing about Medisave, and is that very often the children's Medisave has to be tapped on because the guy has no CPF. And more than one of the children has come to me, you know, I refuse to do this, but they said, because, you know, the way the system works is if you have used your Medisave to pay for your father once, then automatically they tap on your Medisave again when he's admitted the next time. So,
and the question is, why not?
Yeah,
it's a father, right?
Why? Well, no, you know, these uncles who go to Batam, I've had more than one of the children who come to me and say, this guy was a scumbag.
Oh, okay.
You know, he abandoned my mother when I was like 3 years old. She had to bring me up on her own. And then now he's trying to take away my Medisave.
Okay.
You know, so there's a lot. I said, look, you have to deal with it. Okay, he's old, he's got HIV, he's got pneumonia, he's got all this kind of thing. And I'm sure he regrets it. I don't know. You know? So these are the kind of family issues that you have to deal with. I think you may have seen this, the Maintenance of Parents Act.
Yep.
they found quite a significant number of them had neglected and abused the children. And then, now they're trying to put in legislation to say that, these parents cannot claim from their children, if that's the case.
Okay. Prof, can you shed a bit of light on, all these policies that the SDP proposes, right?
Right.
So when I look at the website, it says the Singapore Democrats.
Right.
Okay, then there's the Young Democrats.
Sure.
So it's the Singapore Democrats. Who are these Singapore Democrats? So we know it's SDP.
Yeah, correct.
But behind the scene, right, how does it work?
Yeah, so the healthcare policy, when we launched it, there were like 10 or 11 of us who actually went public, which was quite interesting and it was quite nice. But, there is this element of fear in Singapore. So I think that recently we came up with the SDP plan to exit the pandemic about a year and a half ago. And we got the same people involved.
So are they all members?
No. In fact, only I think like one or two of them are members.
Okay.
The vast majority of them are volunteers. But this time I asked them to put their names and every single one of them said no. And what's been happening in the last few years in the medical community is that there's all kinds of things that have happened. One of them is income tax has started going after anesthetists. And this is an interesting story. So previously the corporate income tax and the personal income tax were quite close. It was like 18% and 17% at the top level. Then what happened was they raised the personal income tax.
Now it's what, 22%?
22%.
Okay.
But they lowered the corporate tax, you see.
It's now 17%.
17%,
right?
correct. So what happened was a lot of the anesthetists, they were told by their accountants to form a company. And anesthesia, he's the guy who puts you to sleep when you go for surgery. They generally work out of home, see. They wait for the surgeon to call them, and then they go there, they give the gas, anesthesia, make sure, monitor the patient, and then they go home and that's it. They collect their check at the end of the day. So they formed a company, but they had no employees and they had no office. Yeah.
Which is fine, right? They can...
No, IRS went after them and told them they were doing tax avoidance.
Oh, okay.
And threatened them, see, with huge... so after that, all the anesthetists got scared.
Okay.
And they've come up with this new Healthcare Services Act. And frankly, most of these GPs are compliant with the Act.
So do most of these GPs, most of these doctors previously, were they sole proprietor?
They are most of them are sole proprietors, but nowadays they're being bought out, as you said, by the chains. You see?
Okay.
So they either become employees or they become. There's various kinds of arrangements that are made, and part of the thing is because a lot of the costs have gone up. So in the early days, when you're the first GP, if you're the only GP in the estate, you of course will be printing money.
Yeah.
But when there's more competition and and what happens is that people start to undercut you. The Uber business model, where you go in, you charge $6 consultation. And then when you get the market share, then you can raise the price or you charge more for drugs and things like that. So it's, and again, see, if we had a single payer system, you can't. There's a fixed amount. You get $10 per consultation.
So how does the SDP come as a collective to say that this is our stand on this is our policy?
Yeah, so the approach is, again, usually it's a group of volunteers led by one of the party members. Most often than not, it's a CEC member who has an issue which they're interested in. And obviously, and Dr. Chee is usually involved in this because he's been in the field for a long time. And then the group will come together, will put this thing together, and then it goes to the CEC. And then the CEC will review it. And then it becomes adopted as a party document.
Okay, then you'll trash it out on the details.
Correct.
And
right.
Okay.
And we usually have a public forum where we get some input from the public, and either early on or later on. I mean, in a way, PAP does that. They have their policy forum, and they have a very similar kind of process, except they have much more resources.
Okay, so the WP, right?
Right.
The leader of opposition,
right,
have always said that they do not aspire to form the government,
right,
for whatever reasons.
Right.
Does the SDP aspire to form the government?
Well, we are very realistic. See,
Okay.
and the reality is we have never fielded more than about a dozen or more candidates in the last general election. See.
Yeah,
So
11.
11, that's correct. So there's no way you can even form a government like that. So part of the reason why we do these policies is that they are like the gold standard. See? So we think that this is what the state should should be like. And, if the PAP were to copy some of those ideas, okay, fair enough. And we get bragging rights in a way that we published it earlier. But in a way, things are better for Singaporeans. See, like Medishield Life is a huge advance over the Medishield. So I think that is positive. And it also spurs us on to think of better ideas in that sense.
I mean, I want to say that I'm a huge fan of, the policies that the SDP has. Not so much into the details,
right.
I'm talking about like the fact that you guys are even coming out and putting out a position and a paper to say that this is an alternative that Singaporeans can then
I think we decided a long time ago, see, that we have even way before I joined, the party would have a stand, that there were certain things that they believed in, and we're not just going to campaign on the fact that we're not the PAP.
So why do you think the SDP has not won any seats in the last 2-3 general elections? Since 11, we saw WP make huge progress.
I mean, there's a combination of reasons, and I think number one, SDP has been a target. For 2011, there was the whole Vincent Vijaya Singer thing, which was very unpleasant, and now Vivian is making some kind of sort of backtracking on that, but it's not very clear either. And then Sun Juan himself has been a target for many years, and it's interesting. I was reading Goh Chok Tong's book, and he said LKY actually identified Sun Juan as a potential threat early on.
As a what?
As a potential threat.
Okay, potential threat. Okay.
So that's number one. But I think number two, again, to be very honest, Singapore and the way young people have been brought up is very much in the neoliberal concept. So we are a bit too far of the left for most Singaporeans at the moment. Although having said that, in the 1960s, our parents and grandparents' generation, they were very far to the left. I see. The bulk of my father-in-law was in Hua Zong at the time in 1955, and he never talked about it until just recently when he was telling us, when the school was locked down, they had the Sec 3 students teaching the Sec 1 students. and my wife was shocked. She said, I didn't even know you were involved in this kind of thing. But they were very clear, at that time. But right now, in Singapore, everything is all about money. As you said, financial services. I mean, even in the schools, the top students all want to go into banking and finance. So the culture in Singapore is a little bit to the right of SDP. And I think we have our work cut out to try and rekindle this sort of democratic socialism idea, which incidentally the PAP was a democratic socialist party to begin with.
You came very, very close.
I did.
In the last GE.
Right.
To actually winning a seat and becoming an MP.
Right.
You did like 46% right?
That's correct.
And it was actually a surprise that you were filled in Bukit Panjang.
Right.
So I was just looking through your Facebook page.
Right.
If I didn't know any better, I would have thought that you are an MP. You are an MP. The kind of posts that you put out and the activities on the ground that you are engaging in right now gives me an impression that you are really working the ground at Bukit Panjang.
Yeah, well, again, this is due to the team. I mean, they are just amazing. They know what's going on. They will tell me when we had there was a fire there, and they have people who come to them, and they lay the groundwork.
Okay.
And in a way, I'm kind of spoiled. And this actually refers to even my day job, because I'm a professor, and so I'm very fortunate. I have whole teams of people who sort of lay the groundwork. So I get involved at points where they need a decision or they need somebody to give them some insight. And the team, like I said, have been tremendous because they hear what's going on. People talk to them. We have our Facebook and social media, and as you correctly pointed out, it's quite dynamic. So we get to hear from people, and then we can respond to them. And we also make it a point to do the visitations, to do the festivals and things like that.
How often do you do your house visits nowadays?
Yeah, Tuesday evenings are my day that I set aside for this.
So every Tuesday evenings?
Yeah, it's either a house visit or it's some kind of activity.
Okay. So are you afraid of the Bukit Panjang SMC becoming a GRC, part of a GRC?
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
I mean, that's the saddest thing here is that there's no real transparency about the election boundaries. And again, this is not exclusively Singaporean. This is the gerrymandering that it began in the US, and then it's also practiced all over the world.
I mean, gerrymandering is quite painfully obvious in Singapore, I would say.
I mean, you win 60% of the vote, but you get 90% of the seats. That in itself is already just a plain statement.
You win 60% of vote, but that's because of the GRC system, right?
That's right. It's partly the GRC system, but the GRC system has come back to bite them in a way. Because
they're losing chunks of seats at one go. Okay.
And they are not willing to send anyone there to take it back. I mean, so far we haven't heard of any minister being willing to go to Sengkang or to Aljunied.
And in fact, those who lost seems to not be willing to stay to fight it out the next GE as well.
Yeah, not in the same constituency, that's for sure.
Yeah, or some of them just decide to call the day. I mean, at least it so seems that they decide to call your day, go into private practice, and go into the private sector and all. Yes. Okay, so am I right to say that for the SDP and specifically for Bukit Panjang, the groundwork has started after the last GE and.
No question about that. Okay. We did. I mean, we've been going on our visits. We've been making contact with the residents. We've been engaging with them. We've done every festival that there has been.
Okay. So what's the Bukit Panjang demographics like?
Yeah, it's an older estate. So there are quite a lot of older people there. There are 2 blocks of BTOs. Yeah. So there's some young families who are there as well. There are 3 condos in the area as well. We actually managed to get into one of the condos. It's quite funny. Okay. Normally condos are very reluctant to let opposition parties get in. We got in the next day. The Holland Bukit team got in. Yeah, it's quite funny.
So was it 2 camps, or did you manage to get in through the current?
We got in, one of the MC members was supportive of us.
Okay. So the NC members got you guys in.
Yeah. So then the other MC members said you better let the PAP in as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So am I right to say that you're a lot more confident about your chances at the next GE if Bukit Panjang continues to remain SMC?
I think if Bukit Panjang does continue to remain SMC, we have a fighting chance. And I mean, it'll be a tough fight because I mean Leong has also been working quite hard. Well, I don't know whether he's going to continue and whether they're going to bring in somebody else, but. I think if Bukit Panjang remains an SMC, we're pretty competitive.
I mean, you guys were already competitive at the last GE, right? So the results spoke for itself.
I mean, historically, if you win more than 45%, the chances are you win the next time. That's provided the constituency remains.
Okay. So, as part of your groundwork, right? What do you enjoy most about groundwork?
Well, I enjoy talking to people. And again, that's part of the reason why I went into medicine in the first place. A lot of it is communication, is talking to people, listening to what are the issues, trying to learn from them, but also trying to offer solutions and see how you can work things out. So I find that enjoyable, and it's interesting. It opens my perspective. Yeah.
So earlier we spoke about the competitive advantage of the SDP in terms of new media work,
right?
And we also saw that you just started recently a TikTok account as well. What are your views on the social media scene? Some people say that Facebook is dying, but at the same time we see that a lot of existing politicians, are very entrenched in the Facebook kind of ecosystem and the framework that Facebook has quite well served them in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
And so a lot of them might be, and because it's so much easier to just take a picture and just write some caption and write a post and by TikTok is then there's some production elements involved. What are your views on like the social media scene?
I just do what I'm told because the social media team is very, very good. So they will tell me, like, even right after this, the reason why I'm wearing this shirt is we're doing something for the Singapore football team, which for the coming AFF tournament. But it is true that there's an interesting story about Facebook. So I joined Facebook purely because MOH set up their Facebook account, and they simultaneously set up their blog and their Facebook account. But you couldn't give feedback on the blog; you had to give feedback on the Facebook account.
Oh, okay.
So apparently Koh Mun Wan told the CEOs, he said, I set up my Facebook account and the first person to write in was Salma Khalek and the second one was Paul Tambyah. So I'm beginning to regret it. But, you're correct in that the established politicians tend to use Facebook. But the young people all over the world are using TikTok.
Yep.
And so, I had some ground rules. I told them I'm not going to dance. I said, frankly, I have 2 left feet, so I'm definitely not going to dance. But, I will give comments. I will. And I think they've done it pretty well. A couple of my TikToks have done pretty well, I think, in terms of the number of views. And
I mean, your TikTok style will be a bit more like Minister Shanmugam kind of, but you have.
I'm not going to deadlift though.
A message that you want to
bring across.
Looking at the recent Malaysia elections,
right.
and how TikTok was, they call it like the TikTok elections, right?
Yes, correct.
Do you have any lessons that you drew from the recent Malaysia elections?
Yeah, I mean, I saw some of the TikToks. Again, I still haven't quite figured out how it works, but they send me, Syed Sadiq's TikToks, the guy from Muda. I mean, that's very impressive because he packs some substance into his TikToks. And I think that's what I'd like to do. If that's the means to communicate with people.
Muhyiddin was dancing though.
Yeah, I'm not interested in that.
Okay.
Frankly, no. Yeah.
So you have plans to do a lot more TikToks in terms of sharing the ideas and.
Well, what we did was we did the healthcare one, and there was a lot of questions that came up. So in fact, the next this Saturday we're going to do a recording for answer some of those questions.
Mm-hmm.
We were going to do it today, but then the guy is not free.
Okay. So let me just look through. Okay, so for the SDP, right?
Right.
I'm curious because both you and Dr. Chee
right.
are very strong personalities.
Right.
Okay, I wouldn't say strong, but very distinct personalities,
Sure.
right? For you as the chairman of SDP and for him as the secretary of SDP,
right.
How do you guys split the work in the party?
Well, I have to sign the checks.
Okay.
Because, the constitutions of all the political parties in Singapore, the secretary cannot sign the checks. So a lot of the admin stuff comes under the chairman.
Okay.
Whereas, he does, and again, it's just like in the PAP, the philosophical stuff comes through the SecGen.
Mm-hmm.
But, and he's full of ideas. So a lot of the things that we do come through him, but they come from the others as well. I mean, CEC meetings, I was very surprised. The first time when I went to a CEC meeting, they're like, the 11 people sitting around the table and 10 of them have something to say. So it's not just, Dr. Chee saying, okay, do this, and who's going to do what. But, and he puts up some idea and then 5 people will shoot it down. So there is quite a bit of dialogue that goes on.
Okay. So there's no bubble in
No, I don't think so.
Okay. So Dr. Chee is this personality. I grew up in that generation. I'm 34 this year.
Right.
So my dad always told me that politics is dark and dirty.
Yes, correct.
In Mandarin. That's the first thing he told me. And he always told me, and one of the other things I always like to say is that Dr. Chee is actually planted by the PAP.
No, to make the opposition look bad.
Yeah, to just like do stupid things, and just like, but we also saw the transformation in him. And also, so I don't want to talk about, because I'm not sitting opposite him today, but I just want to, from the party point of view, because you are the chairman.
Right.
So Dr. Chee remains a very, the pillar of SDP.
Right.
Or
well, he's the face of SDP, especially to the older generation. Although, again,
but that might be a boon, or that might not be.
And I tell you, it's very interesting. Even in my own family, I can tell you, before the Punggol East by-election, 2013, my wife had lunch with him, and I can tell you, we were walking away from. It was at Penang Place at 1 North, and the first thing she said to me when she turned around was, "He's a normal person." I said, of course he's a normal person. She said, the way I've been inundated by the media is that there's this crazy psychopathic guy. When he talks to him, she said she realized he's just a normal person like anyone else. And it's the same thing with my mom. She, she's probably the same generation as your parents. And It's for them, he was this crazy guy who's standing there with a loud hailer yelling at people. But I think now with social media, people are able to see him for themselves. And then they can, not everyone's going to agree with him, but at least they realize that, he's not the crazy guy that he was made out to be. And to me, the big thing was before the 2011 general election, I remember seeing him signing books, and he put up the standee, and then people crossed the road on the other side. In 2015, there were people who waited 1.5 hours, to get him to sign his book. So there was a huge transformation when people got to hear him and to see him for himself.
I think he managed to transform his brand very well.
Yeah.
And of course the newer generation, the younger generations,
don't even know about the old days.
And many of them are actually big fans of him.
Exactly.
So for the current political landscape in Singapore, right, we also see a lot of so the last general elections was especially fiercely contested, not just in terms of number of seats, but also the number of political parties that came out.
Right.
And we have another big boy that came out, PSP, and we have small players and all. What do you think is the state of democracy in Singapore today?
Well, the government is trying its best to try and prevent essentially the flowering of democracy and multiple parties and multiple opinions. And the way they've reacted to social media, for example. I'm fond of saying that. We were the first to come out with a podcast 20 years ago and it got banned. And then we did this humorous video and then it got banned, And we've been POFMA'd a couple of times. We had one small victory in one of our POFMAs in the Court of Appeal, but then subsequently they came up with another POFMA. So I think the government is still trying to figure out how to deal with social media, and they are beginning to realize that the heavy-handed approach may not work. Because every time, like for example with the crowdfunding that's been going on, these people get the money so fast that it's just incredible. And Singaporeans, when they put their money where their mouth is, so they really do believe that, Leong Mun Wai or Terry Chee or whoever it is being unjustly sort of silenced. So I think, the social media has been, and I think there was a survey recently published where they looked at different countries, and in Singapore was the highest rating in which they felt that social media was good for democracy in Singapore.
Which is a good thing, right?
I think it is a good thing. There is a danger because in other countries, of course, social media gets completely abused. And that's partly because of the nature of the society. Singapore society is relatively homogeneous in that sense. We have shared experiences. We go through national service, at least the guys do, and the girls have to listen to NS stories. So there is a certain amount of common ground. And we don't have a rural and urban kind of divide like they have in the US or Malaysia, for example. So I think social media is probably a good thing for Singapore. But coming back to the political parties, I'm quite close to Dr. Tan. We interact a lot. We've actually collaborated on forums. We did a walk together in the Pangsua woodland, and it's quite interesting because a lot of people in his party were former PAP members, and including some of the cadre members. And I remember going for one of the events that they had just before the pandemic, and I was telling I can't remember who it was who was sitting next to me, maybe Gerald Giam. I said, this reminds me of a PA event, and actually a well-organized PA event, because they have people who know how to do things, the way the PA does things, the way the grassroots.
And it's 100% a compliment, because even if it's a PA event, we know that in the PA events, a lot of the work is done by salaried PA staff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these are volunteers.
Yeah,
exactly.
And a lot of because I have been in the grassroots, and I have seen how it works.
Right.
And you know that a lot of heavy lifting is done by the CO.
Yeah, correct.
By the constituency officers.
That's right.
So but it does feels to me that the government is taking this whole social media and all this flowering of all these opposition parties in their stride.
Yeah, I mean, the flowering of opposition parties, they think that there will be a natural kind of winnowing process. And ultimately, there may be 3 or 4 parties that will be sort of persist or continue, because it's kind of expensive to run these kind of programs and to do your grassroots activities, to do your programs are not cheap in Singapore.
And you need people who know how to do them as
exactly,
well. Yeah.
That's right. So the opposition parties is one thing. The flowering of media, though, there's POFMA, then there's now FICA, and they're wondering how FICA is going to be played out. And so, it's... I think they're still finding their way.
So one of the reasons I started this podcast, and of course I'm kind of interested in politics as well,
sure.
But I also felt that there is a space and market for a more neutral kind of platforms,
right?
To deep dive into topics and all.
Sure.
So the way I see it is that some of these, like you mentioned, Terry Chee, Leong, they do tend to give people a more kind of antagonistic kind of impression, and it does feel like platforms like New Narrative,
Well, again, this is partly because the mainstream media is so much on the other side. So if the Straits Times and the Taobao, they just portray one particular point of view. So in a way, if you can really seize the middle ground, there's going to be hugely successful. There's a couple of people who managed to do that. Mothership, though, is Philip Yeo and George Yeo, so it's also it's viewed with a certain amount of skepticism from the opposition side. There's actually Plan B. Are you aware of Plan B?
Plan B SG.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, they managed to have Chan Chun Sing and Tan Cheng Bok, Shanmugam,
Tan Chuan Jin.
That's right. So they have PAP politicians. I've been on Plan B as well.
Yeah.
So I think there is some kind of space for that. But right now it seems to be podcasters.
Yeah, it seems to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what's your message to young people when you see them, young voters?
Yeah, I mean, I think the key for the young voter is to start asking questions, see, and asking questions about why things are the way they are, and whether there's any way they could be better, and what can you do about that? Because I think that's the key, see, rather than just accept that these are the way things have to be. Because again, in order for society to progress, you have to start asking questions.
In the last 5-10 years, do you see young people becoming more interested in politics in Singapore?
No, I don't, unfortunately.
Oh, you don't?
I don't. And I think part of it is because of the pressure. I mean, you look at the cost, and you know that. When you get married, you want to have a BTO flat. I mean, it's insane. You got to put a down payment of $100,000 and see where you're going to find that kind of money. So,
provided you get a house.
Exactly.
In the first place.
Yeah. I mean, my wife's godson, so he's in the BTO queue, and he's now facing this decision: do I get a resale, give up my BTO, or do I, just wait? And now the rentals have gone through the roof. See, so he was originally planning to rent until the BTO is ready, and his mom doesn't want the house is small. You don't want to have and you want to give the couple some space for themselves as well.
So young people should. So you feel like young people, it's not that they are not interested, but more like
they're bogged down by so many other things.
Okay.
And I think that's the trouble. You see, when you see a problem, you just try and put out the fire. You see, you don't try and see where the fire is coming from, and it's hard to do that. When the fire is staring you right in the face, see, the first thing you want to do is get the fire out of your face. You see.
Okay. Is the SDP being able to attract younger volunteers?
Oh, we get plenty of young volunteers.
Okay, then that kind of contradicts what you just mentioned about.
No, the trouble is
that
they have a short attention span.
Okay, so do you think they just come in for?
They come in for a while, and I think unfortunately, again, they get bogged down. The pressures. They have school, they have exams, they have university, and then once they want to start a family, and then regrettably though, we've had a couple of them who join civil service jobs. And then they drop out. So one of our very promising young volunteers. And his is not even a civil service. It's actually a stat board.
So they feel obliged to drop out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, I keep telling them I'm the prime example. See, it's an autonomous university. And, the president and the vice chancellor, they all know fully well what I'm doing.
And you have people like Brian, right?
Yeah,
who works
exactly.
in
KK.
in KK Hospital as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
See, and although that's an interesting story, I mean, before the general election, I called up the CEO, his CEO, who happens to be a friend of mine. He said, "Oh yeah, don't worry." And he said,
why do you call him?
No, because Brian was a bit nervous. You see,
Okay.
he said there were some people in the board who were asking questions. You see,
Okay.
and so I said, I know the CEO pretty well. I said, I have a chat with him. He said, yeah. He says they shouldn't be asking questions. He said, because we're not civil service. Civil service is different. Civil service, you cannot belong to a political party.
Yeah.
But if you're in a GLC or in a stat board and things like that.
So you feel that there's still this element of like self-censorship?
Oh, there's a huge amount of that.
Okay, but it's improved, right, over the years?
It's hard to say.
Like you said, you're the prime example, coming out.
Yeah,
like,
but I keep wondering whether I'm just a token. And again, I've always said, see, it's all a matter of being in the right place at the right time. So I got involved in politics around the time the NUS was courting Yale NUS. So it was very convenient, and it was, in a way, I mean, not taking anything away from the university president, but it was convenient for him that he could turn around and say to the Yale people, look, I got an opposition guy in my faculty. So.
Okay. Okay, I think I have asked most of the questions I wanted to ask about politics. I just want to ask a few questions about the COVID situation in Singapore now. So for someone like me, I'm 34, I have no pre-existing conditions, and I'm generally healthy as far as I know. I've taken my 2 primary vaccinations, I've taken my booster, and I do not want to get my second booster because I've had an infection. One that knocked me out for like 5 days, high fever and all. So I feel like I've built a certain amount of antibiotics, right? And also, I think the main thing is that I start to question whether because the long-term efficacy of the long-term safety of the vaccine
is still not known.
Still not known.
Yeah, correct.
So for someone like me who is hesitant to take the vaccine, the second booster, what do you say to me?
Yeah, actually, frankly, I've told people like you, 3 doses and the actual infection itself is pretty good. In fact, the data suggests, this is data from Qatar, that once you've had 3 doses and infection, you are likely to be immune for a very long time.
What's a very long time?
I mean, the virus has only been around in the world in the last 2.5 years. But in Qatar, when they had the Delta wave, then they had some people who had 3 doses, at least 1.5 years, you see. So I think that's... You see, the kicker is if you're young and healthy, then your risk of, even if you get the infection, the reinfection is actually very mild. Ong Ye Kung has already revealed the Singapore statistics that with the reinfection, it's like 1/10 of the severity of a first-time round infection. So young and healthy, I say just chill. Okay. And I think there's no great urgency to do it. Some people are very worried they get sick during an exam or they're traveling on this, going backpacking across Siberia or something like that. Then fair enough if you want to get a second booster at that point in time to avoid getting sick. But it's a relatively short duration of protection as well. So I tell them get vaccinated about a month before you go.
So, but for the seniors, would that be the same?
Seniors is a different story.
Okay.
See, for seniors, they may not mount a very good response even for the 3rd dose. So in that case, getting a 4th dose is perfectly reasonable.
Okay.
And actually, ironically, the worst side effects are in young men. So, a 30-something-year-old guy, and if you're relatively well, just relax, I think.
Okay. Then another thing amongst my friends who have young children, including my siblings, is that a lot of them are quite, it's a tough decision, right?
It is a very tough decision.
Whether to vaccinate your 6 months old and your 9 months old, your 2-year-old. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, again, I'm not a pediatrician, and I just had that, but I do get that question every now and again. And what I tell them is the current recommendation is for the 5 to 11-year-olds is pretty safe. The 6 month to 5-year-old, there's very limited data. See? And right now, the government has not made it mandatory. So if your child has some chronic illness, if they have asthma or they have something else, then yes, definitely. But if they don't, then, that's a kind of difficult decision that you should have a discussion with your pediatrician or your GP and try and see whether, you think that you want to do it now or you want to wait until there's more data.
Okay, so you would say that still on a case-by-case basis?
Case-by-case basis.
Okay.
Like I said, those who have chronic conditions who are at risk of serious disease definitely should get it done. Those who are otherwise healthy, you can actually on a case-by-case, you can talk to your doctor.
Okay. So I had a chat on this show, I had a chat with Goh Meng Singh.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that although he has very strong opinions, but the one thing that he mentioned about the long-term safety profile of the vaccines, no one can outrun time, right?
Right.
So from a professional point of view, so what makes a vaccine safe and for you all to declare it to be safe?
Yeah.
Is it like the elements, the ingredients that goes into it, it's all safe? Like, how do you all know that it's safe?
Yeah, generally what we do is we do a clinical trial. And usually you wait for 6 months to a year for the follow-up. But the dengue vaccine, the first year follow-up, no signal. Second year follow-up, no signal. It was only on the 5th year of follow-up, then they realized that there was some long-term problem. So the US FDA actually mandates that you follow these people for a long period of time.
So for the dengue vaccine, as an example, what was the long-term side effects?
So what they found was the children who were vaccinated who had never had dengue before, they actually did worse than the children who were not vaccinated. And so actually, to HSA's credit, they recognize this as a potential problem. So if you want to get the dengue vaccine in Singapore, there are 4 strains of dengue. You actually have to go for a special blood test to show that you've had one of the strains. And then you can get the vaccine. Otherwise, you're not supposed to get the dengue vaccine in Singapore. And that protected us from this complication. Yeah. So I know Meng Seng is pretty extreme in his views sometimes, but he's correct in this. See that we have only got the most about a year and a half of follow-up. So we don't know what's going to happen 2 years, 3 years, 4 years down the road. And the fact is that at that time, 2020, 2021, when the Delta wave hit Singapore, ICUs were full. There were people, we were running 2.5 ICUs in our hospital. You take, it's the risk versus benefit. So even if there is going to be some complication later on, you'd rather take the vaccine because you don't want this kind of, crisis to happen. But now things are different. The whole of Singapore, I think there's like 6 people in ICU right now. So you have time.
Coming back to like vaccine injuries, right?
Right.
There are some stories going around in the heartlands that there are just seemingly more people who are just falling ill, like stroke. They have stroke.
Yeah.
They are dying of like heart disease. Dropping dead. And I have heard stories myself as well.
Right.
So are people right to be concerned about all this?
I think part of the thing is that we are influenced by what's happened in the US. And in the US, it's become so political. See,
okay.
That something happens and it gets blown up on either side of the case. And this is one situation where there is some kernel of truth in that. There was that young guy who went and did weights just around here. And in fact, he collapsed. He was very lucky. His brother came and did CPR on him. Otherwise, he would have died. And that was very clearly a vaccine-induced heart problem. So it can occur, but it's rare. And as a researcher in the field, what's interesting is to try and figure out why it does occur. And what we are discovering is certain allergies, for example, they occur in certain people with certain genetic predispositions.
Okay.
And I'm pretty sure that's going to be the case with this. So if you had a certain genetic predisposition and you got an mRNA vaccine, then your risk of getting a heart problem is going to be much, much higher than 99% of the population. Trouble is, right now we don't know who is the one.
Okay, so these are always the outliers.
Correct. They are the outliers. I mean, the vast majority. I mean, they vaccinated millions and millions and millions of people, and you don't see them dropping in the streets, but you do see people, and there is a small excess mortality, but we don't know whether it's due to the vaccine or whether it's due to people missing out on routine care because the wards were closed for COVID, elective surgeries were delayed, and things like that.
Okay, and it does. So is it established that the Chinese vaccines are less effective as
No, I don't think so.
mRNAs?
Not at all. In fact, I just read a paper out of Argentina where they use both the Chinese vaccine and the mRNA vaccine, and the results are the same.
Okay.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is marketing by the US companies.
By the better marketers.
Yes, that's right. The Chinese companies don't market very well.
Okay.
At least not to a Western audience. But in South America, they use both Chinese vaccines as well as the mRNA. And as far as I can tell from the published data, it's comparable. You see, what they do is a lot of these studies that are done in the West, and even in Hong Kong, they measure the antibody levels. And because the mRNA vaccine is so powerful in producing an antibody level, it can produce a very high antibody level, which performs better than the Chinese vaccines. But we don't know, it's not just the antibody which kills the virus. It's also this thing called the T cell. And in fact, the Duke and US people have shown that the Chinese vaccines produce the same level of T cell as the mRNA vaccine. So I think they are comparable.
Okay. Prof Paul, I just want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
So what's your plan or aspirations in politics? Do you see yourself going like just one more run, the last GE and the next GE, or like do you see yourself going all the way until you like?
Well, no, I mean, I think, a lot of things can change in politics. And this is what we have learned from what's happened in other parts of the world. I half-jokingly tell people my ambition is to be the health minister. But in order to be the health minister, there has to be an opposition government, which is not going to happen in the next 5 years at least, you see. So I would like to carry on in the next general election. And like I said, if Bukit Panjang remains SMC, I think I've got a pretty good chance. And if I do, there's a whole list of questions I'd like to ask in Parliament. And, if Leong Mun Wai is in Parliament, we can put our motion together. Or even if Sun Juan is in Parliament, it's even better. See, we have two of us who can file a private member's bill or whatever it is.
Okay. So do you look at Leong Mun Wai's performance in Parliament sometimes and shake your head?
I don't think so. I mean, one
so?
of the things is that, he's not the most articulate individual, but I think he has drawn a response. And actually, even before the GE, he's communicated with us quite a lot. And, he's come for some of our events. And he's quite a clear thinker. It's just that, when he's on his feet and getting tekan by everybody around him, I think but he will improve. It's just a matter of time. You see. So the substance of what he says is pretty solid.
Okay.
It's just that his style, he has to train to get to be Shanmugam's level.
So you feel that in terms of communicating, he can do a better job?
Yeah, I think he can. And I mean, it's he's pretty articulate in Mandarin as well as in probably better in Mandarin than in English in that sense.
Okay.
He also speaks Japanese, by the way.
In fact, he has a very strong Japanese accent
he does.
when he speaks English.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah, it's
right. I know
if
people
if you go to Taiwan and you hear some of Taiwanese speak English, right?
Yeah, they speak like him.
It's kind of that the accent that he has. Okay, so so what? Do you have any other things to add? What's your?
No, I mean, I wish you all the best. I think that there is space in Singapore for somebody who's neutral, who's willing to talk to Goh Meng Seng and Shanmugam.
Oh, very.
And I think this kind of thing needs more airtime, and hopefully it will change the face of political discourse in Singapore. When we came up with the healthcare plan, we offered to debate the PAP time and again, and there's only one time I ever did. And that was when Tommy Koh organized a forum at NUS, and Lam Pin Min was arrowed to represent the PAP.
Okay.
And I met him at a function before that, and I said, "Oh, I'm looking forward to debating you." He said, "I got arrowed to do that."
So coming to this, right? So I'm sure one of the common questions that you get.
Right.
If you jokingly tell people that you would like to be the health minister,
right,
and people always say, then why not just go join the PAP and make the difference in the PAP, in the government, as the actual health minister, which is certainly more possible than doing it in opposition party.
Yeah, so I have a TikTok on that.
Yeah, you do.
I do. And the reality is that, when you're an individual in a big party, it's very hard to change the system. And so many people have gone into the PAP. I mean, your neighbor, Louis Ng, is everybody's favorite of the opposition, everybody's favorite PAP MP. But he cannot make a difference really. He's a lone voice every now and again. And when I say about the health minister, even if you're not the health minister, if I'm not the health minister, at least I can present the evidence base and what the health minister in a way should be doing. And if they steal our ideas, well and good, you see. But I think that was the reason why I got into politics in the first place. And I think I just want to keep going on that.
Okay, Prof, I wish you all the best in your groundwork in Bukit Panjang, and also certainly in the next GE.
Thank you.
I think one of the best things I can wish you is that Bukit Panjang remains an SMC.
I hope so too.
Because we have seen in the last few GEs, right, what happens when a particular SMC does particularly well. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
And I hope that in future, especially certainly in the next GE, I can have the opportunity to have you on again.
Oh, certainly. I look forward to that.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you.